Okay, the time is 6:32.
Just recording.
We do not have to.
We're good?
do the roll call. No one's online.
But we still should, because it helps me with minutes.
Then
Okay.
let's do it.
Well, the time is 6:32. I'll call this meeting of the Concord Finance Committee to order, and we'll start with a call of the roll.
Suresh Bhatia. Peggy Briggs. Kathy Cuoco.
Here.
Eric Dahlberg.
Here.
John Garofalo. Here. Ted Geyer.
Here.
Greg Gariello.
Here.
Don Kupka here. Lindsay Liss.
Here.
Dee Ortner.
Present.
Carlin Reed.
Present.
Paul Rodriguez.
Here.
Quasi Sadruzaman. Sri Tupel. Lois Wassoff.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna join this.
We have a quorum.
Okay, we have a quorum. Tonight, our intention is to invite final feedback on the guideline and then discuss and vote on the final guideline. But before we get there, we'll start, as always, by inviting general public comment. Does anybody have any comment unrelated to the guideline? We're going to have a separate opportunity for input related to the guideline. Anybody in the room? Seeing no one raising their hand. Anybody online? Seeing no one, will proceed.
There's
Oh,
one.
sorry, there's one.
There is, okay.
Let me promote him, hold on. Okay, Brett's on.
Okay. Brett,
Hello?
Brett Fay, please introduce yourself and feel free to share your comment.
Brett Pye, Spencer Brook Road. I heard that you're not taking input right now on the guideline. I was wondering what time of the agenda. I'm headed to the airport to pick up a daughter from college. So when will that input be allowed?
It will be, I'd say, within the next 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll hold.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. We'll proceed then to item number 3 on the agenda, which is guidelines. The first bullet under that is tax implications. We're going to defer that to our January meeting. We're still finalizing those calculations, so that'll be ready to go for the next meeting. Okay, but we can proceed with the guideline discussion as planned. So on the guidelines, I'm going to pull up some slides that I prepared just to help frame the discussion tonight. And I'm sharing those on my screen. I thought this would be helpful to orient the committee to what it is we're doing tonight and to serve as hopefully a helpful primer to anybody who's tuning in to this discussion. First, what are the guidelines all about? What are the guidelines? Under the bylaw, we, the Finance Committee, have a responsibility to set an annual budget guideline, which is a recommendation for growth and spending subject to the guideline that our analysis indicates Concord can sustain given projected cost growth and projected taxpayer ability to pay. How do we do this? The bylaw gives us broad discretion in how we arrive at the recommendation. In recent years, we've used a 3-pronged approach. This is the approach we use this year. Top down, we align on a range for sustainable tax growth with those metrics. Bottom up, we collect information from the budget units, the towns and the schools, to understand their needs and priorities. And lastly, community engagement. We invite input from the taxpayers to understand their priorities. We typically issue the guideline in 2 stages, a preliminary guideline, which we did last month, and then a final guideline, which it's our intention to do tonight. When? We talked about this at the last meeting. The guideline is meant to come before the budgets. It's meant to serve as a recommendation for the budget. So it comes before the budgets are developed and issues, not the other way around. In terms of when we're required to issue the final guideline, there was a clarification to the bylaw in 2021, fairly recent, that requires that we issue the guideline 5 weeks before the warrant closes. So this year, the warrant closes on February 19th. So our deadline is January 15th. Any questions so far? Okay. How we got here and where we're going. I was reminiscing about when we got started on this. It's hard to believe it was 6 months ago in June when we kicked off the process by revisiting the fiscal year 2025 experience and aligning on a roadmap for this next year, fiscal year 2026. In July, we prepared those budget information request letters to the budget units. We sent those in August, and it's also in August that we approved those metrics. In October, we received and reviewed input from the schools. In November, we received and reviewed input from the town. We also approved the preliminary guideline, and we invited feedback on the preliminary guideline from town and school leadership. In December this month, our goal is to approve the guideline. Then we're on a little bit of a break. We'll still have meetings, but in terms of the guideline process, we have a little bit of a break before we kick off public hearings on the budget articles in the spring, in April and May, and make our recommendations. And then it's full speed ahead to town meeting, which is quite late this year. It's on June 2nd. And all along the way, we've invited public input. We've heard from the taxpayers. So our goal tonight is, first, we want to invite any final feedback on the preliminary guideline from taxpayers, from school leadership, from town leadership. After we receive that feedback, we want to consider if and how it may justify adjustments to our assumptions, inputs, or calculation for the preliminary guideline. The way I like to think about it is, did we miss anything? Now's our chance. Is there something we didn't take into account that we should have? And then lastly, come to consensus and take a vote. What we are not here to do is to debate budget priorities and trade-offs. That's not our role, and we don't have budgets yet anyway. We're not here to question individual budget line items, neither retrospectively, looking back on this year or past years, nor prospectively. And we're not going to speculate on how town meeting may or may not vote on budget articles. That's likewise not up to us. Any questions or reactions? Okay, with that, I'll pull up the preliminary guidelines as we voted to approve them last month. And I will open it back up for public comment. Now, this is public comment specific to the guidelines. After we hear from the public, I'll invite school leadership to share their feedback. We'll budget about 10 minutes for that. And then we'll invite town leadership, the town manager is with us, to share feedback on their guideline. Likewise, about 10 minutes for that. So with that, public comment related to the guideline. I know we have at least one taker. Is Mr. Fye still with us?
Brett, you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can.
Excellent.
Take it away.
Take it away. Okay, so my comments won't be on CapEx, which I don't think you're discussing this evening. My comments also will not be in relation to school committee because I haven't had a chance to dig into the school committee. But I did download personnel reports for the town being the services and then town manager's office, finance, IT, and HR. And from those reports, if the reports are correct, head count in the town administration, which would be the town manager, finance, HR, and IT, is up 20% this fiscal year. And I had a call with the HR director, and she said either those reports are wrong or the calculation's right. Either of those answers are not good answers. I've spent a couple of meetings with Anthony Asaldi, and I think he's a very capable financial professional. But as my discussion with him, we have 20 people in finance spread across various town entities. And I think this is a moment for our town leadership in the townhouse to figure out how to run the town administration more efficiently. And so my recommendation would be a 0% increase for operating expenses for the town.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wish to offer public comment on the guideline? No one raising their hand?
Nobody.
Okay. With that, we'll proceed to school leadership feedback. Gary, would you like to join us at the table?
Thank you. Thank you. So I first just want to say again, thanks for running such a collaborative process. We across the committee, the school committee, feel as though we've been heard. You've listened to our struggles, what's going well, and ways in which we can continue to improve, and we're very grateful for that. So thank you. We are, as you know, still in the process of building our budget. We will not see our first budget until January 7th. So Lori and Bob are still crunching numbers and working through all of the different aspects of it, but I do have a couple of things to report. First is that the out-of-district placements, taking those out of the budget has been absolutely game-changing. And as a result, I'm happy to share that I believe that we'll be able to meet the guideline at the region. As set by the preliminary guideline. It is a slightly different story at CPS. We are, the administration is reallocating and reducing everywhere, and we are very committed to and aware of the consolidation savings that we promised, and we are committed to that. But even still, the 1.8% would be very challenging to meet and would require a lot of student-facing reductions. So as we were reflecting on different, your conversation from the preliminary guideline, I know there were various different models that you were looking at, and a target that we felt would be challenging but possibly more feasible was that mid-level of 2.7%. So we felt like that would be still require a lot of fiscal discipline on our part, but would be a more reasonable target for us. So some good news, some challenges, a lot of work ahead, but we're here for the process. And if you have any questions, I know Alexa and Lori are both on. I can't see the list, so I don't know if anyone else from the committee is, but we're welcome. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, why don't we open it up to clarifying questions for Carrie and school leadership, other members of school leadership who may be with us. And then we'll save the discussion until we've heard feedback from the schools and the town. Okay, so clarifying questions for Carrie. Colin.
Gary, you said that the CPS is interested in a 2.7%, right? Can you give me a dollar amount, what that number would be?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I'm looking at, okay, so,
I can tell you, because I have it
okay,
here if you want.
yeah.
All right, so the 2.7% would be, oh, sorry, I thought I had it right there, but it is 47,772,579.
Thank you.
So that's, it's 100,000 more dollars than, approximately 100,000 more dollars than our initial guideline, or the guideline that we provided before. And it results in like a grand total across all the operating units, we would go from that 2.44% to 2.85%.
Lindsay, can you just have that ready for discussion so that we can see it on the, see it?
Sure.
I'm sure everybody will ask during discussion.
Lindsay, what percentage, how much, what's the difference in terms of, as a percentage of the full amount of the spending between what we have suggested and what Carrie's now indicating they would like to do?
Hold on 1 second. 1 second. Okay, so what is that 100,000 kind of relative to the guideline?
Well, and
Relative
also
to-
to the full budget.
To the full, the total town, or sorry, total CPS budget?
Yeah,
It's like, hold on 1 second. 0.2%.
0.2% of the total budget.
0.2% of the operating unit forecast that was provided, a month and a half ago.
And of the guideline spending, it's point,
Yeah, and of the guideline spending, it is, it's about the same, because it's only, yeah.
so it's, we're asking CPS, and I appreciate this isn't easy, I really do, but we're asking CPS to find an additional $100,000 in savings in a budget of, say it louder,
47,772,579.
yeah, okay.
Okay, John and then Dee. Dee.
Okay, I'm kind of curious, the 100,000, is that targeted from one account, one discipline? How was that being decided?
I'm going to let Lori, I'm going to let Lori weigh in on this, if that's okay.
Yeah, I actually,
Yeah, we don't, want.
actually
excuse
wondered
me,
if we
Dr.
could
Hunter.
check.
We don't want to get too into the weeds on individual line items and budget.
No,
Well-
I just had a
At
big
this
picture
time.
question because we were looking at a different delta between the 1.7 and between the guideline you offered and the
Okay.
one that Carrie brought up. We thought it was hundreds of thousands, not 100.
John, looks like you have a point related to
Yeah,
this.
so I think, just so we are all on the same page, we were at 47,357. I think their number is like 47.8 million, which is about a $400,000 delta. And just so,
Yeah.
to help us with our discussion, we should
Sorry, but
understand
sorry,
that magnitude.
You're comparing to 47.8 million, which was our guide, which their forecast was 47.8 million. They're saying they want if we could do 2.7, right, total, that's instead of the 1.81, the 2.7?
So the
Right.
base last year was 46.5 million. If
Yep.
I'm just going off, so if we go up 2.7%,
Okay.
that's 47.8 million, where we were going up 1.81%, which is 47.4 million,
Okay,
rounding.
sorry,
So
let
the
me-
difference is 414,000
Yeah,
between
sorry, give me-
what we
yeah, sorry
said
about that.
and what they're asking. So I believe that's the number we should be looking at.
It looks like the difference between with savings and without savings.
It's close, yeah, it's close to that, because without the middle school savings, I think our number was 2.89%, the CPS. So it's about the same, a little bit less. Okay,
So it,
Can we ask them if that's what they were thinking, rather than us?
Yeah.
Dr. Hunter, is that the number you were thinking?
Yes, that is what we were thinking. Usually a percent for us on the CPS budget is about 400, 450, so that absolutely lines up.
and so it is equal to, it's in effect saying that the costs have gone up so much that it's wiped out the savings on the middle school consolidation. Is that right, Dr. Hunter? I mean,
I mean, you know, there's a lot of moving pieces here. I suppose that's one way to look at it. We also had all the salary increases to negate and any other increases across the lines. We've been digging in deep and finding and reallocating or reducing everywhere we possibly could. We definitely can show you the 500,000 from the middle school. That's going to result in layoffs. And we have that all, we have it outlined in terms of a number of people. We're still debating a few positions, so we're going to talk about it in big pictures for a little while longer. So we can show you those reductions. The actual increase, the numbers I'm bringing to the committee will include maybe a few other reductions because we're in zero basing staff, and if we've had enrollment reductions, you know that, so we're always looking at the impact of that, so I'll be able to show you that as well. So it's not exactly one-to-one, but I guess the overall outcome feels like it is, but a lot of iterations in between.
Okay. Other clarifying questions related to the school leadership feedback? Dawn?
Yeah, hi, thanks. And again, would echo your comment, Carrie, that the process is terrific. Two questions. One is, do you think that we'll be able to have this year that retrospective look at cost per student? I've asked for a couple of years, and we haven't been able to do that. So if we could, that's one metric I'd love to be able to see and include in our report. The other question is, I know makes perfect sense, everything we've discussed so far, taking things out of the guidelines, the out-of-district tuitions. At the end of the day, of course, we'll be absorbing it, and so can you speak to the process of how we would get visibility to that?
Lori, do you want to talk about this?
Sure, and that would be more of a regional discussion because actually at CPS we're down a little bit in spending on out of districts in our projections for FY26. The numbers and the number of students we've placed is actually going to equate to some decline there in the cost. At the high school it made a huge difference, otherwise we would have been directly competing with all the increases there of those out of district placements. In terms of, do we want to shift to the high school and talk on that, or did you want to stay with CPS where it really wasn't as much of an issue?
Yeah, I think that question is applies to both and looks, at the
Sure.
picture, just so we can see those sort of out of guidelines spending impacts that we have to be mindful of.
Sure. At CPS, we don't have anything that's out of guideline, so that's a straightforward answer.
Okay.
At the high school, we also don't have anything out of guideline until you made that decision. Even things like insurance and workers' compensation and OPEB, things that are out of guideline for the town are not out of guideline for us typically. So that was pretty groundbreaking that you were willing to have an out of guideline conversation with the schools. That was the first time that that's happened.
Yeah, so just wondering what the process will be for us to get visibility to it.
At the high school budget, we're showing it as something, you'll see it in the line item, the increases, and we can work together on how to present it in the slides so that the data, the documentation and the data reflects how we all came to that, those numbers.
Okay, so we'll see it at the same time then, in January?
Sure, oh, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll still be
thank you.
there even though it's not in guideline. You'll have all the information.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Dr. Hunter.
Thank you.
And we'll certainly come back to this when we have our bigger picture discussion. But next, feedback from the town.
Carry number 2.
Different spelling.
All right, so thank you and good evening. From the town's perspective, we are also grateful for the work that the Finance Committee has been doing over the last several months. We did submit something that was in the packet. I know it was late, so there's no surprise that what we are asking for this evening is consideration for an increase of 3.25%. I think what I'd like to mention, I'm not sure if Anthony has mentioned, but like the school, we're at the beginning of our budget process. Our departments are all working on their budget submittals, and they're due on December 30th. We then spend the next month, the month of January, we'll be going through all of those and coming up with a final proposal that we will take to the Select Board on February 3rd. So we're making estimates, right, like you're making estimates as you're going through your process. Our estimates are better than the last time we talked to you because we've had more time to work on them. Our biggest driver really is increases in salaries, and there is some information in the packet that shows that basically at 2.6%, that's about our salary increase if we are able to keep our merit pool at 1.75, and that's what we're planning for right now. So we have a number of, all of our non-union employees and a number of our union employees, their compensation is in two pieces, a cost of living adjustment or a step adjustment, plus a merit increase for meeting certain goals. So we have 6 unions. 5 of them had contracts that expired on June 30, 2024. Right now we have 3 settled. We have 1 that has a final offer on the table that's very good, and we have 1 that we know where we want to be and feel that it's very competitive. So I feel very comfortable with the salary numbers that we're showing you right now as our increases for fiscal 26. I know there is talk about headcount. I don't really want to get into that. There is, and I'm happy to answer questions, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. There are a number of emails that have gone around. There are people asking for information. There are comparisons being made between data that's coming out of our payroll system that has all employees across all funds. We operate a number of enterprise funds, which are different than the general fund. The payroll data doesn't have vacant positions. The way that personnel board report was rolled up is not the way that it is rolled up in the general fund. For instance, general administration, the town manager's office, the sustainability director is included. He works out of the town manager's office. There's a separate budget. There's a separate FTE. There are a number of those issues that we're happy to talk to people, because I certainly understand looking at these documents, it's not necessarily easy to see. But we prepare reports for a number of boards and committees for a number of different purposes, and you can't just take 2 that were prepared for different purposes and say that they're equivalent. There's some explanation that goes with that. That said, I've talked to you before that we operate out of 18 buildings in 14 locations. That is not like other communities, right? A lot of communities have a big municipal building where most of their offices, most of their operations are centered. When we are spread out over lots of different locations, we have additional costs, both in personnel, because we can't share across buildings easily, and just in utilities and supplies, and there just are a lot of costs that we have that you wouldn't see in other communities because we're spread out. Again, I know you've talked about the increase in headcount across the town over the last decade. We acknowledge it has grown. We've had positions that were specifically voted by town meeting outside a budget cycle. The sustainability director, the school resource officer, both of those positions were approved at a special town meeting. They weren't even part of a presented town budget. We stood up an in-house facilities department, and we believe that is saving the taxpayer money by having services in-house. We hired an economic vitality manager based on strong urgence from the community, and that was outside of the budget cycle. Our library is significantly larger than it was 5 years ago, and there was a head count associated with that expansion. We've had a second ambulance in West Concord to provide 24/7 ambulance service out of both of our stations. That's happened in the last 10 years. I think those were the number of things that I wanted to mention. So we certainly are not recognizing that there has been a lot of growth to meet the service demands. We've talked to you a little bit about future savings that we see through consolidation of software. We believe we'll have probably some pretty significant software savings. We do expect an FTE reduction as a result of that and updating some of our processes and procedures. Right now, I'm a little hesitant that we are going to commit to saying we're going to open July 1, 2025, open fiscal 26 with those savings in hand. We would feel more comfortable if we could be planning for those further out. And I think I just will end that we know that the Finance Committee has always been fair to the town, and we appreciate that. The town has also always prepared a budget that has met the FinCom guideline, and we would expect to do that again this year. But we would like some additional consideration if that is possible. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, clarifying questions for the town manager. Dee and then Dawn.
You mentioned that you have, what, maybe about 18 different facilities where people are working?
We do.
Okay, is there any discussion on consolidation of some of those?
Yeah.
That would reduce
The-
costs?
There is. I think the opportunity at MCI Concord has, piqued our interest that maybe there's a potential there. That's really, I guess that's the one potential that we are thinking about. It is a few years off. If you tuned into Monday's Select Board meeting, you know that we're looking at what we're calling a property matrix. So we've identified all of the properties that the town owns or may own in the future, and we're looking to match needs with property, for sure, for consolidation, and then potentially freeing up some municipal property that could be repurposed, redeveloped, even privately, to benefit the town.
Would that impact the types of facility needs that you have in the future? I know that there's been discussion about more modernization, different locations, et cetera. So I'm just wondering if that's also in conjunction with what you're doing.
I think we definitely see a benefit to consolidation, and we're hoping that there'll be some promising developments there, but they're not fiscal 26. They're further out than that.
Okay.
Dawn.
Yeah, hi, Carrie. Thanks very much for this opportunity to ask a couple questions. I have one question and one sort of observation, I guess. The question is about the enterprise funds and the town.
Mm-hmm.
You began by saying, well, there are files out there, people have been asking information, and it's not all the towns, they're the enterprise funds. And one of my big worries about the enterprise funds is that we're duplicating costs. We have a director of this and a director of that, right? Whereas before they would have been consolidated. And perhaps that's true within finance, maybe, I don't know, but there could be other areas as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is that anything that we could look at and say, well, gee, if we were all actually in one place, we could possibly have all of these groups done, this function could be covered by fewer people?
I think if we were consolidated, we would have a lower head count for sure.
Yeah.
It's administrative and, maybe supervisory and above, but we definitely can see it with administrative. You mentioned financial, we do have, the only place outside of the town's finance departments that we have dedicated finance people are at the light plant, and then within Public Works, we have a business manager.
I didn't mean to pick
Yeah,
on
no,
that.
just-
I just mean in a general way, because I walking around town, I see the trucks that say, this is water and sewer, and I imagine there's going to be a whole fleet of trucks, maybe I'm wrong, that will say stormwater management, because that's a separate enterprise fund, so you can't share the same trucks. And I'm wondering if we aren't, this is a bigger question, are we adding cost by dividing into enterprise funds?
So the model that we have for the Stormwater Enterprise Fund does not include additional headcount.
Okay.
So we would be expecting to do that work with our in-house staff. There may be some consulting work, but I hope you don't see a truck that says Stormwater Enterprise
All right,
Fund.
great, thanks.
Town manager's office.
And then lastly was just comment. When you were speaking about the positions that were added through votes at town meeting, my mind went to, can we make trade-offs? Is there something where we say, well, gee, the voters really want this, we're getting marginal benefit out of that. So is there, something we can stop doing when we add something new? And in part, I bring it up because I've spent some time digging into and I'll be speaking about it a little later, the levy limit and where we are, and how we're approaching that, and know that it will be necessary to make trade-offs. So thinking in that line ahead of time is a good thing.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think Colin was next, and then John. Sorry, John. And then Greg.
Gary, I've been watching a couple of committees, and I've noted that, like the Stormwater, MCI, the Middle School Building Committee, and the Light Plant, there seems to be a concerted effort to shift salaries from a general fund to these various enterprise or specific funds. And I was wondering if your calculations of your request have included, for example, whatever staff salaries would be recovered from, say, the MCI grant, were it to be granted, or from the shifting of salaries to the Middle School Building Committee fund.
So I know there was mention at an MCI advisory committee meeting of shifting salaries. I can tell you that's not something that I felt was fully vetted, and I don't see that as a strong possibility. And the MCI advisory committee put together a budget for the full $725,000 that does not include any shift of municipal salaries. The shift of a portion of a salary for the town staff support to the middle school building committee, that was a request that was made because we are using the salary of a vacant FTE. I would call that a one-off. And we went for more than a year with holding a position vacant so that we could fund the salary of the staffer that's working with the middle school building committee. It impacts our operations when we can't fill that position on a full-time basis. So those, again, I would call that a one-off.
John.
Yeah, two quick questions. Can you please address Mr. Fai's question, and did headcount increase 20% year over year? And then you mentioned hiring economic vitality manager position kind of outside of budget. How do you quantify the return on that investment?
Are those questions that the committee is looking for a response? Or is that too detailed?
I think it's appropriate if you
Yeah,
want to
no,
address it
I'm
quickly.
happy
Yeah.
to. I just didn't know if that was too detailed. So Mr. Fai's, when he said 20%, I'm not exactly sure what numbers he's using. I know there's a number floating around that has a head count of 10 in the town manager's office, and that is not accurate. That includes the assistant town manager, who is the HR director, and that FTE is in HR. It includes the sustainability director. So I'm not exactly sure, without going back to my notes, where he's calculating the 20% from. We have, I did know when we went back and looked at the budget, I did see in fiscal 24, again, I don't have this in front of me, I wasn't expecting to talk at this level, that there was clearly a position missed. And if you go back and you look, there has not been a reduction in staff in the town manager's office. And somehow there was a reduction, and I would imagine it was due to a vacancy that was picked up. In terms of, did you ask about the EDC or sustainability or?
Well,
both of those.
And if I'm out of line here, pull me back in, but I still don't think we answered the question, did the headcount increase 20%, which is just a percentage, it doesn't, and I think that was a fair question from a citizen. And the other one was about that position, which, I think is a meaningful cost to the town, and I'm curious how the town determines the return on that added cost.
So I think if you want me to address the headcount, I would just like to go back to the notes, because again, I've seen a lot of numbers going around. I can tell you, in the town manager's office, we have myself, the deputy town manager, we have 2 admins, we have a communications manager, and we have the risk and compliance manager. And we've had those positions for a number of years. The sustainability director headcount, which would be included in the 10, is in a different budget. It's not the town manager. It's a general fund budget, but it's not the town manager's office. And the EVC manager. The EVC manager position, that is a position that was added, I believe, mid-year fiscal '23, not contemplated in the fiscal '23 budget. That position was brought forward with a strong recommendation from the business partnership and other members of the business community. That was vetted through the select board, and a decision was made to add that position using, because we didn't have funding, using ARPA for a partial year, and then that was rolled into the budget for the first time in fiscal '24. The value to that position, the select board has long had a goal for economic development, economic vitality. We have an economic vitality committee. I know you are interested in seeing additional non-residential property tax revenue coming into the community, and other types of revenue. So this is a 1 FTE, a full-time position, working directly to enhance economic vitality and development in the community. It's not an easy thing to do because we have some significant limitations. We have wastewater treatment capacity limitations. But this individual has done a lot of work to sort of demystify the costs associated with opening a business in Concord. And she's done a lot to help in the time that she's been here.
Okay. Greg?
Yeah, I got 2 questions real quick. Going back to your first, about the percentage increase, you mentioned something about the merit pool, like salary was the biggest driver, right? And
Yeah.
you mentioned merit pool, you said 1.75% of that. I didn't catch what the 1.75% was. Was that of the increase? 1.75 was because of the merit pool?
So our projected personnel costs, union, non-union, known, and anticipated, is $842,000. So it's just about 2.6%. Of that increase, $274,000 is the amount for the merit pool that's 1.75% of the 2.6. Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, that's right. I just didn't catch where it was from. And one quick question to both. I know we had in the meeting with the select board, I think, we talked about mothballing of the middle school. Is that counted? I didn't pour over the details of everybody's budget. Is that counted somewhere in somebody's budget? Any cost additional for mothballing the middle school?
So my assumption is if the building is surplus by the school committee, and I think we all expect that to happen at annual town meeting, that those costs would need to be in the town's, on the
Because
town's
there's some
budget.
costs, right? Like putting up fencing or doing whatever
Yeah.
there needs to be done, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, like so Kerry said, if that would have to be included in the town's budget next year, some kind of cost, and we still need to determine what that is.
All set?
All set, thank you.
Okay. Sri, do you have a question?
Hi, Carrie. You had mentioned that some technology drivers are going to help in the headcount. Are they coming this year, or could they be accelerated? I'm just trying to understand that piece.
Are you, I don't want to steal your thunder. Are you-
No, that's
Okay.
fine. So, as you heard us mention, we're doing some conversions right now, and the biggest one is payroll. So by doing the payroll conversion and going to Munis, we incorporated an HRIS system, which currently we used ADP for payroll and then another application called Cornerstone. So when Kerry's talking about a reduction, so now that we would have Munis, we would eliminate those two. So, and we would recognize some kind of savings from going from 2 applications down to just maintaining 1. And in fact, it's actually going to give us a lot better information because there's going to be position controls. So some of these questions that come up with personnel, which we struggle right now in a way because we have a couple of different systems where we're getting it, that hopefully down the future, in the very near future, that we'll be able to produce those answers and have vacancies and have all of that budgeted. I don't know if you want to add anything else.
No, not necessarily. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Clarifying questions for the town manager? Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. One last piece of feedback I'll flag. It was in the packets. We did hear back from the Carlisle Finance Committee. They indicated that they unanimously agreed with the preliminary guidelines set for the region, the 3.48% for the region. So I think it's safe to say, based on what we heard from school leadership, based on that, that we have consensus on the CCHS number. With that, I'll open the floor for discussion. Based on what you heard from school and town leadership, what are you thinking on the guideline? Greg?
Did we get the dollar amount from Carrie between the 2.6 and 3.25? We got from the school committee, the CPS was about four.
Oh, I think I do have it right this time. Like, look, 212.
It was about 450 for CPS, I think.
Yeah, it's.
414.
414 for
Yeah, we almost have it, I think, Peggy, because it's about the difference
So
between
Didn't she say 3.25%?
the budget without.
Yeah.
That's what you need, 212. Yeah, that's what I thought too.
212
Yeah.
for the town?
212, okay,
So
thank you.
212 for
Delta
the,
between what Carrie is asking for tonight versus the guideline,
The preliminary. So
versus the
either,
preliminary guideline.
either we have to increase it by 212, or they have to find 212 in their budget, or roughly 10%, or 1%. Less than 1%.
It's so delta so the difference as a percent of the request tonight is just 0.6%, or is it, what should I do it as a percent of the
I'd take the
guideline?
212 divided by the 33.6,
Oh, okay.
right?
Yeah, is 0.63%.
0.63, yeah. That sounds about
Or
right.
as a percent of the guideline, oh, it's a hold on.
Of
one
the whole
second.
budget.
Well, as a percent of which budget, like the,
The 33,597.
okay, well, the 33,597 was the guideline for
Oh,
next year.
increased budget.
Okay,
okay.
so as a percent of what they're requesting tonight, or is it percent of the preliminary guideline?
I think she said what they're requesting, I think.
Okay, that's what I
The
thought.
excess what they're requesting.
0.63.
So a quick way of doing the math is just the 3.25 compared to the 2.6. Just compare those two numbers and it tracks from a mathematical
Oh,
standpoint.
sure, right, okay, thank you, of course. I got it.
okay.
For,
Is that okay with Greg?
Lindsay, not to ask you to do
I'll
more.
put it
but I
up
was
on
gonna
there.
ask you, yeah, if you could put the chart that we have that shows how close we are to the levy limit, where every, like, percentage that we have, right, so that we can see, like,
Good idea.
what our first one is and what our second one is without, and everybody at home can then track it, who looks at this later to.
Okay, so here's what CPS net told us, right? They said they'd rather a 2.7% increase in the total. And that's got just that 412, sorry, I'll move these over. And I'll go to the table you're requesting in a second, Greg. I just want to get to the total number. So just make sure I'm doing this right. The requested amount today, so that 2.7% increase over last year's number equates to 47,771. The difference between that 47,771 and the preliminary guideline is 412, and that's so that delta as a percent of tonight's request is 0.86%. And then the town, the requested increase tonight was 3.25%, which equates to 33.8 million. The delta from the preliminary guideline, 212, I can make this bigger,
It's 213.
or 213, which is 0.63% of the request tonight. And then if I add up these two numbers and add up the preliminary guideline plus this 625, it gets to 105,538, and that's 3.05% versus last year's spending subject to guidelines. So we go from the 2.44 to the 3.05. So then I think we can go to the table that Greg wanted to see, right? And look for the 3.05.
Yeah, with the levy limit and all that stuff, yeah.
That does, as you toggle over, Lindsay, the 3.05 includes CCHS as well, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it
Okay.
does, because they're unchanged.
Okay.
Right.
So this is that number, and let's
You just make that, can you do,
yeah, I'll highlight it, and then I'll make it bigger.
for a couple of us in the back row?
Yeah, I'm just gonna go like this, and then I'll make everything bigger. Here, hold on. Oops. What did it just do? Oh, I know what I did. Oh, I have rows hidden, sorry about that. So never mind, let me just make this bigger though.
Nothing like pressure on you. Quick, do these calculations.
Just freeze it here. Sorry, 1 second. So it ends up being this, this number here. This unused levy capacity consumed is 605,000.
And what's the percent on the unused levy capacity?
2.77%.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Down from 3.3. From our, which was our preliminary guideline. Okay.
Colin?
Well, earlier, when we were talking about the preliminary guidelines, I had suggested that our initial stance was a little bit tight. And yes, it was a little bit tight. I didn't, my recommendation had been to go to a 3.22. This is 3.05, which is less of an impact than I was expecting. I'm not thrilled about reducing the levy, unused levy capacity from 3.0% to 2.77%. I don't know what that's going to bode for the next year. It's not a good trend. It is something that I'm thinking about, and I was willing to go with 3.22, so I think I'd be willing to go 3.05 at this stage.
Thank you, Colin. Other thoughts?
Stick.
Peggy and then John. Do you want to elaborate, Peggy?
Do I need to?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to stick with the preliminary numbers.
Okay, John and then Tree.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything tonight that would change my mind from preliminary guidelines.
You know, what is the overall impact of the taxes to the residents and all based on this? Is that we want to see the whole picture? Is it just, there's no impact at all?
Yeah, it has an impact on the tax.
So that, we need to take a look at that too, right, in the holistic sense, rather than just these numbers alone, because that'll tell a better story, basically.
Yeah, and that's, we don't have the tax impacts fully mapped out yet. That's what we hope to do at the next meeting. And we've traditionally waited until after the guidelines finalized to do that.
I just have a procedural question associated with what the schools could do. If they're saying that the regional high school, they could live with the preliminary guideline, but are having a hard time with CPS, could they harvest from one to pay the other?
We asked that question last year.
They did that one year. 2 years ago, somehow they were able to balance a division, but it's tricky because, you know, they're separate entities and it's.
I'm not, that's not a leading question.
No,
It's
I'm
a ignorance question.
No, it's a perfectly reasonable
question.
question.
Well, I don't think they did it. They happened to come in lower
Yes.
and the other one was higher. So in the end, it came together.
That's exactly
But they
right.
don't, they can't do that.
Yeah.
If they're up 10 over here and down 10 over here, yeah, you're
You end up
lucky.
in the same place,
You're lucky,
but,
right?
you know, Greg is right, because
The superintendent is still online and has her hand up. Dr. Hunter?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Promote you to bar.
Great. Sorry, I had to re-enter. Years, and typically the answer has been that those are two different guidelines and not up to us to swap money around. I've had plenty of years where I've been a guideline on one and not the other, and no offer to move money between them was made. So that's been really your process more than ours. In K-12 districts, they do that all the time where they shift money from one to another. I only have pre-K-8 to work with at the CPS level, which is definitely a very different level of options. So that's the short answer is no, and we've never been told it was up to us to do that. It was always two separate guidelines.
no, that is right. What happened, Greg was remembering correctly, that what happened a couple years ago, Dr. Hunter, was that one budget came in under where you expected it to be, so as the overall number matched up.
So
It
that would
didn't,
be the
you
way to
didn't
do
move
it.
anything.
We're not moving it. The question is,
That's how to do it, how to have
can
one
we
come in and
further
out,
tighten up the region?
right?
Can we lower that guideline in order to increase the guideline at CPS? I think that's the question you're asking.
That's
I'm-
the way to ask
I mean,
it.
I think that would be the follow-up question that would come from that. And I appreciate, Superintendent, the information that you provided. It was just more of a question for the Finance Committee on, you know, what has happened in the past without necessarily leading anywhere, just out of curiosity.
Yeah, so I've been under guideline in one and not at the other, and it's been an ongoing discussion as to whether those two could be connected or not. So.
But to get to the 2.6 overall, we could revise the high school down if we thought Carlisle would go along with it and
Increase
and
CPS.
do some kind of compromise on the guideline for the CPS. We could do that.
Could, the one thing is though, the guideline we gave to CCRSD was below their forecast and they're meeting it, and they are meeting it
Yeah.
still. So they did come down versus their forecast.
Right.
It does seem to be, you know, they went ahead and they did it, and now we're saying.
Do more.
Penalize you some more.
Yeah.
But I do have a follow-up point is I do hear like the encouragement associated with listening to their concerns and being a partner and meeting the budget guidelines based on like that partnership, and I do appreciate that effort associated with that. And I don't think we should necessarily second guess that level of effort and that kind of meeting of the minds to kind of come with a solution going forward. So I don't want to undercut that or necessarily suggest that we should ask for more, even though that might be an eventuality.
Or in other words, why penalize them for coming in at our guideline?
That's right,
Yeah, exactly.
even though we might have to.
Actually, I have a question, maybe it's for Dr. Hunter or for Carrie. I am struck by the fact that the number that CPS is asking for really is the guideline if we didn't get the benefit of the middle school savings. So are we not realizing the savings that you expected to realize? What, I mean, it's just kind of striking that I can use the chart that Eric put up before that shows the difference between what the guideline would be for CPS without the middle school savings and what it is with it as a proxy for this conversation, because the number's so close.
Well, honestly, the number is higher than, we're trying to
900.
compromise with you by saying we need 2.7 when we probably wish it was closer to 3. And we don't have the budget done yet to do all the backup, which
Yeah, I
is
understand.
hard for us tonight to convince you, I think, and that's a little unfortunate with the timing. I mean, the middle school, I have a list of staffing cuts that's because of the consolidation of the 2 schools and the economy of scale we're going to gain there. I have 2 positions, one, and I don't want to get into individual people because
No,
they
and
don't,
we're not
nobody
asking you
knows
to
who's
get
on
into
the list.
details.
We're even taking one this year, I guess I should say, as we open in February. So that list will be in the budget presentation we do in January, so you'll very clearly see that we realized actually beyond the 500,000. The part that's tricky to show you tonight without the budget build and all the information that goes with it is there's other mitigating factors that were increases that also have to be addressed. And so, there's different moving pieces here that, look like they even out almost when they actually are just purely coincidental similar numbers. So that'll be, I think, much more evident in January as we package everything together. But I mean, I hope I'm being clear. Like we're cutting FTEs middle school and even a little bit in other places as we look at enrollments and caseloads. We're consolidating and economizing all sorts of different services and scales. Really, really hard work went into this budget build, and the 2.7 coming off of contracts that are all pretty much around 3%, I thought was something to be proud of. So more to come in January, I guess.
Don?
Dr. Hunter, I keep coming back to wondering what the increase is on a per student basis, and what in that data would be really useful also as we do some what-if scenarios for the future. We're looking, of course, at how close we are to needing an override, which is certainly, the town had been there before. It's something that it wasn't always approved. And it creates a lot of stress and et cetera that within for you when we get there. And I'm wondering if there's anything that you would do differently now, especially looking at that per student cost, thinking that we're headed toward that. And the more we increase today, the sooner that problem arrives. And then the second part of that same question is there anything that, from putting the 2 schools together, that has surprised you, or perhaps you've yet to get across this bridge? But we know that fewer students means fewer staff once you get to a certain point. But if we had an influx of 50, 100, or 100 students, say from a already approved housing project, what will happen to our budget? We know that our levy limit won't grow much when that happens. It'll grow a little bit through the increment of additional property taxes. But back of the envelope, I think it'll be a net negative. But that's one reason I really want that per student information, to be able to look at these what-if scenarios for an influx of students coming down the road. It really worries me that we're continuing to spend more money for fewer students. What's going to happen when we have more students? Thanks.
So, Don, are you looking for more than what the DESI web pages are posting with the per pupil expenditures? Because that's the formal number.
I looked at
That comes off of our end-of-year reports, and DESI sanctions those numbers, so those would always be the ones we would use. Otherwise, it's us doing, our own math.
I asked because I had looked at that. I had actually presented that previously, and I thought I heard that that wasn't accurate, and that you had a different way of looking at it. At least that's the notes I took. So
I think you're remembering the peer-student ratios. Those tend to be much more tricky to feel like they're presenting it apples to apples. The per pupil spending cost, DESI has its formula, and they pull the same data from all the end-of-year reports. So I think those are pretty good. They tend to lag a year behind because we file and then they use it after the fact. But anyway, more to talk about there. In terms of incoming students, it all depends on how the kids are spread. The elementary schools are down. There's a little bit of room for growth there that we could absorb potentially with minimal staffing impacts, which I would equate with, the homeless shelter. We added support staff for the needs of those kids, but we didn't get classrooms because Willard had capacity to absorb the almost 50 kids now that they have without additional teachers. So it all depends there. In terms of middle and high school, we're down there as well and could absorb a certain amount without additional staffing. It all depends on the needs of those kids. It depends on their grade levels. I think one time I gave you the example, if all of the kids come into a certain grade level, that will drive staffing because we won't have that little bit of buffer that might take a class of 19 where we can absorb them up to 20 or 21 in each room. If we get too many, we're gonna have to add a section. So it's hard to say in one fell swoop. What I am really going to show you as I bring you the budgets, and we've been talking a lot about this as a team, with the enrollment decline, we have been trimming staff. So I want to be sure I can show you those counts, both those students and FTEs. We are zero-basing staff every single year to be sure that we're shaving and supporting students and not overstaffing, especially with enrollment shifts. So more to come. That's always been the mission, and that hasn't changed.
I'll rely on those DESI figures. I know that for last year, there was, they showed a large decrease in student population, so our cost per student rose in the high single digits. And I'll be bringing that. I just wanted to give you a chance to give me the figures rather than me, that we were all on the same page. Thanks.
Yeah, let's keep talking, Don, because we want to be talking about the same data points.
Yeah,
for sure.
right, exactly, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, other points?
I'll just
Peggy and
elaborate-
Colin.
Okay, just elaborate on my very short comment. I am very focused on the levy limit and that track. That's kind of my number one concern right now.
Colin?
I share your concern, Peggy, about the levy limit, but I think it can afford to go up a little bit. And I don't see a problem with going to the, it would be the 2.77% from the 3.30. I'm also wondering if we're trying to focus on picking a final guideline. And we've heard two positions so far. One is hold still at 2.44. The other is my recommendation of taking this combined, both town and school request for combined of 3.05. Now, we could do something in between. We could do neither. We could do both. Well, we can't do both. We have to pick something, but we should be trying to get to one particular guideline because that's the goal for tonight, right, Eric?
That's right. Thanks for that, Colin. Okay, I will, my own view, first, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we're in sync on CCHS. I think that's noteworthy. I don't think we've gotten there before with the preliminary guideline, so that's great. What I'm hearing, and I really appreciate the feedback from CPS and from the town. And I respect school and town leadership immensely and appreciate that they took the time to bring those points to us. But I'm in sync with Peggy on the levy limit. I think any increase to the guideline chips away at that unused levy capacity and brings us closer to an override. Won't happen this year, probably won't happen next year, but it's going to bring us closer. I've heard that CPS and the town, they're not questioning the assumptions behind our calculation or the inputs or the calculation itself. They're asking for more flexibility in crafting their budgets, more guideline, and prioritizing the levy limit as I am. We don't have it. Lois.
I also agree with Peggy and with you. I appreciate the pressures that the schools are under, and sympathize. I also understand, I think, some of the issues that the town is facing. But this is going to be a process that's going to take time. And we need to begin the process of really addressing costs. My background is not in municipal institutions, it's in commercial institutions. But my experience with it was that there's usually stuff in a large budget that you can focus on and that you can find savings in. And I know one way we don't approach this usually is to look at the difference between discretionary and non-discretionary spending. But we can tease that out of the information that you give us, and there's always some discretionary spending in there, and there's always some places where you can make decisions. And I agree we should stay with our guideline, which I think took into consideration the approach of the possibility of an override. And it also took into consideration the feedback that we are all getting, that the tax burden in town is becoming a serious problem for many people who live here, both the overall tax benefit and the way it's allocated amongst various property owners. So my feeling is that we stick with our guideline.
Dee.
I agree with what has been said. What I think about, though, would be very simple. I think we all need to be thinking differently. We can't continue the way we have been going from a financial standpoint into the future. We just can't do it. We can't afford it. Taxpayers, I would assume, would like to be able to pay their taxes. So I think we need to just start thinking differently about how we approach the work we do. Less flexibility, start controlling costs as we identify them, and really look at the future. A couple of years from now, I don't want us to go into an override. It's just not something that I think is good for the town. So I would be against any increase other than what we have already established.
Other thoughts?
Don?
Don.
I want to give the town and the schools both a lot of credit for the way in which you've presented these budgets. I don't want to leave you with the impression that we think you're leaving money on the table. It's not that at all. I think my point would be more that we need to prepare for a more difficult fiscal situation soon. And wouldn't it be better to start that now rather than later? You're probably more aware than we are of the school budgets and town budgets that have been voted down in overrides elsewhere in the state. So we know that it's happening today. Happened in Acton, for example. You don't want to be caught short, short when have to have mass layoffs. If we can avoid the override, we'll all be better off, and that may mean that we can't have level services, that there's something that has to give in the interim in order to get from here to there. I always think that Concord is really, really good at speaking up and asking for what we need as citizens, both, from the roads, from the schools, from you name it, right? We're very good at asking for what we want and what we need, and I think that both the town and the schools are very good at responding to their constituents, at making sure that they do everything they can to give everything that's asked for, which is wonderful. And then there comes the FinCom, and who our constituents are the taxpayers, who we're hearing from more and more about the having reached the limit. And of course, the state, Prop 2.5, created that tool of a limit on the amount of taxes that can be levied. We haven't been in an override situation since 2007. I think if we were to agree to the 3.3, we could easily be in an override in either the following year or the year after with inflation. Yeah, and I think we need to at least present to the town a path that shows how we can avoid that. So that's where I stand, and I hope, and I know that it can't be done with level services. I understand that. So I think the question now becomes, what do we not do? What do we do without? And also, I think you should reiterate the need for that economic development of all sorts. If we can bring in more tax revenue, the tax revenue in excess of the cost that it incurs, the additional cost it incurs on the town, then we have the pockets to pay for everything we want to do, which is really what we want at the end of the day. So we have a little time to get there, but not much. Thanks.
Lindsay.
Yeah, so I was going to mention that revenue piece, so I completely agree with that. And I think this is like a call to the select board and to start, really doubling down on those kind of efforts to improve economic vitality. But I would also say that my sister lives in Acton, or not lives in Acton, works in Acton, and saw all those cuts. She works as a school teacher there, and it was a really painful situation. And so I completely agree that I'd rather avoid that, because then it is a huge cut and you're away from level services, right? At one drastic moment, you have to cut everything and everyone feels it. But if you're incremental this way, in trying to, be fiscally mindful, maybe there's an opportunity to improve efficiency rather than cut services, right? You can find ways to incrementally become more efficient, whether it's like work from home policies to avoid, duplicate positions around town, or just creative ways to become more efficient rather than having to just make a drastic cut all at once. So, yeah, after, hearing the stories of what has happened in towns around here, I really do want to avoid that as well. So I'm leaning towards the maintaining the preliminary guideline, just so we can be more incremental about this rather than have one of those drastic moments.
Other thoughts? I want to make sure everybody who wants to be heard is heard. Paul.
I just wanted to highlight the idea that I think we're all kind of saying similar ideas and where we need to be, both short-term and long-term, and the need to get there is kind of unknown of how do we actually achieve this. And I think that the only way that that's possible is continued work, combined work and working together with both the school and the town and as like able partners. And I really love the idea of like kind of reaching and understanding what the needs are and really like achieving that partnership as best we can, figuring out the creative ways that we can support each other for that mutual goal, because it won't be good for anybody if we can't. So that's, I mean, I'm going to support maintaining the preliminary guideline with the idea that it wasn't meant as a punishment, it was meant as a move forward together, so.
Peggy?
Just briefly, I just want to remind everyone that tax revenue and growth isn't the only place to turn. There are parent fees. We could turn to the business
Grants.
partnership. You know, there are other groups in town, fees for certain activities. We went through that last year. So, you know, I think that's another creative way for the schools and the town to find some resources if people really want something.
Okay.
So
Greg.
I'm struggling a little bit with which way to go here. Lindsay, can you bring up the chart? Because this brings us down to what, 2.7 levy? Is that
Approximately.
2.77?
Yeah, here's the three, here's,
And we're currently at 3.3, right?
yeah, so actually it's between these two, so 2.75.
So if we went, you know, I'm just trying to think, right? So at the high school, they met it, yeah, and as Lois said, big, you know, corporation, you could squeeze the towel a little bit to get a little bit more water out of it, maybe. So if we, you know, potentially, you know, take 100,000 away from that and then sort of divvy it up between the town, because I know, you know, everybody keeps putting pressure on headcount, and I absolutely get that, I understand, but there's also this other factor of it. When you drive headcount down, people are overworked, and then stuff starts to fall apart even worse, and then talent retraction and all that type of stuff, right? So, and I know Carrie, number 2, said, said that a lot of her budget was from salary increases, correct? Right. So I was wondering if there is something that we can do in between the two of them and play with the numbers. I don't have a specific thing to throw out at this minute. I would have to think about it for a little bit more, but if we knock down, like I said, you know, CCHS a little bit and try and, you know, hey, we're working with you guys, right? We threw out a number, they threw out a number back to us. This is a work together. This isn't a, nope, we're sticking to our guns, right? Sort of, everybody, I think the whole town understands that we are, you know, approaching the levy limit, and we are working together and taking it incrementally, as Lindsay said before, so.
Anyone else? Okay, if all, actually, let me go online. I know we have at least one member online. Suresh, anything you wanted to add?
I do believe that, I think the levy limit is the way to go, but if you have to go a little bit more, I would consent to that, but not, you know, all the way up to, you know, 3.25. So somewhere in between, you know, as a, more of a like a, I think an in-between number would really help everybody work around together here, and the schools have done it, you know, they've been working around it, and I would like to support that.
Okay.
Lindsay, can I ask you to do really quickly, just take, I don't have this sheet in front of me, or else
Sure.
I would play with it. You know, take 100 away from the, yeah, from there, and then just really, really quickly cut the other 2 in half, and what number does that bring us to?
Sorry, take 100 away from where?
The high school. Which number came in exactly as planned, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what their number is with planning, right?
Lindsay, while you work on that, I see Dr. Hunter and Alexa both have their hands up. Dr. Hunter, did you have a quick point?
Yeah, I just wanted to just name a couple of things. One is that the schools have been working really hard to bring in additional revenues, not just parent fees. Parents are paying for an awful lot of things, both directly through fee structures and in an enormous amount of incidentals. But we are actively applying for every grant we can find and being quite successful. We're now tuitioning kids into our special education programs. I feel like we're doing our part, and frankly, that's why the number is what it is. And I just hope everyone really focuses on that, because it's either revenues or tax increases. Those are your options. And I feel like we have the same conversation every year. I think the other thing I just need to say, I can't get to the guideline you're setting without cutting programming. So I'm going to have to bring that to the school committee, and that's going to become a public discussion. I think level service was the goal. That guideline doesn't provide level service. We are trimming staff and services and materials everywhere we can to not touch level service. So I just want to say that because we've been really collaborative in the last 6 months, and I had hoped to continue that. And I just have a lot of concern as I share information, that's going to get harder to do. I wish we were having this conversation after the budget was done instead of before, and I know the timing just didn't work out, but I feel like we're gonna have to really work hard to stay collaborative given the information that's gonna follow if you stick with the guideline you set already. So, thank you.
Alexa, I see you had your hand up, and then Dawn.
I do. So I just wanted to talk with a little more specificity about parent fees and what has changed in the last 5 to 10 years here in the district. As like Lori mentioned, the schools specifically continue to attempt to, reduce what is in their budgets. I'm looking at the fees and whatnot that I've paid into for my 3 children this year, between sports, school supplies, which as recently as 6 years ago were included in the budget and now are not. Our family has taken on an additional burden of $2,650 this year. So these fees are not insignificant. They're not in the hundreds for many families. They're 4 figures. And, like all of you, my taxes have gone up extraordinarily too. So I just want to make sure that is very clear, that there is a significant burden because so many things have already been eliminated from our school budget. So, I notice sometimes there's sort of generational, I don't want to say battles, but I really don't like the idea of pitting parents against seniors and that kind of thing. So I do want to emphasize that parents in the schools are doing their part as best they can.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Dawn.
Thank you for that, Alexa. I think that was an excellent perspective to bring to this meeting. I have a sister who's a teacher, and I can't believe, not here, she's in Connecticut. I can't believe, though, the amount of money that she puts on the table as well for her classes. And I don't think that anybody here wouldn't rather that we had a bigger pot of money too, and we would all like to be doing more if possible. I wanted to bring also a perspective. I've been going through the state's, all of the override votes in the state, and looking at the trend. And for just another useful data point for everybody, is that 3 years ago, the 82% of overrides passed. Last year, it was 45% statewide. That means most of them did not pass.
Are these operational or the debt?
These are operational.
Okay.
These are operational overrides. Yeah. So it's there is something going on, and we feel it in town, and we just all need to be mindful of it. That's all. Same. And I totally. It's just so really it's in the same sense of what you're bringing up, Alexa, which is that, yeah, parents are being pushed, squeezed to the point where it doesn't make sense. This is supposed to be public education, and we can't really be expecting parents to be paying more. So I agree. Anyway, one more data point. Thanks.
Go to Kathy, and then looks like Mary wants to add something.
I just wanted to add my voice to say that I agree with Peggy and Lois and Eric and a few others that at this juncture where we are with the levy, with our taxes, we have put all of the factors into the formulas, which we use to set the guidelines, and I haven't heard anything that says that the formulas are incorrect. So I think in a fiduciary capacity, I would want to stay with what we've put in place.
Thank you, Kathy.
And I, like everyone else, do feel that there is a tremendous amount of highly talented professionals, both in the schools, in the school committee, in the town financial management, and in no way is this a reflection on anyone, but rather a reflection on the financial circumstances of the town. Thank you.
Mary.
Thank you, Eric. Is this working?
Mm-hmm.
Good. I'd like to make 2 points. One is, as a member of the select board, I have an opportunity to get very close to the town. And I really do agree that there is room for cost savings and efficiencies in the town. You have to understand that in municipal government, things evolve over years. In corporations, you once in a while look at how can we streamline and how can we use software. In municipal government, I haven't witnessed that. What happens is we just dump more and more work, and we put these, we kind of bolt on these new processes, an Excel spreadsheet here, a PowerPoint presentation here, a Word document here, and we don't take the time to look for efficiencies. And I'm sure that the town government has gotten the call for, let's look at more efficiencies. That doesn't happen overnight. In corporate, this takes a lot of time to look at how do we streamline operations, how do we automate after we've streamlined. So I think that the town has gotten the message and will be making those. I want to emphasize, though, that this year, that hasn't happened because the town has been working on the MCI, which was a big surprise and took a lot of effort, and the 250th. So I want, the message I want to leave is that I think the looking for efficiencies and cost savings is something that they take seriously, but I do know just by being here almost every day that the workload from MCI and from the 250th has been very well handled by the town, and so that's, I want people to recognize that. And I'm kind of worried we might be sending the wrong message, because the town manager and the town has always met the guideline. They're not going to go public, as I heard the schools say a minute ago. So they're going to meet the guideline. So I'd be very careful about the message that you're sending, and because whatever you send today, they'll find a way to make it work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Okay. Okay, lots of good discussion, lots of good points. My sense is that
Can I
we're...
just say one more thing?
Yes,
Okay.
Lindsay.
Well, I'm kind of, I'm so hearing from Mary, hearing from Eric, or sorry, from Greg, and Suresh, like that maybe there is like a way to slightly compromise and or just find, I guess I'm leaning towards like the, good faith, to what Paul was saying, and recognizing the importance of kind of collaboration and working together and and encouraging open dialogue. If there's maybe an opportunity to just budge a little bit is the way I'm kind of starting to.
Why don't we, can we look at a couple of scenarios to give us a sense of what the impact of that is? Because I think you're making a really good point, Lindsay. And there has been.
2.7 to 3.03 is 2.8 or something, or 2.85?
I was just putting in a couple.
While she tees that up, Dawn.
No,
Yeah, I want to build on that by saying, I want to go back to Carrie and to the schools, both, and say, would you rather have more headroom now, knowing that that brings an override perhaps a year sooner? And if so, then would you want to work together on a plan that gets us over, to Mary's point about efficiency, it takes time, but we need this bridge, but we're going to work together on a plan so that we can avoid those override votes in the future. And I'm saying that both because that's just what makes sense. It's what we would do in a business, right? We would say, yeah, we know we have to have some losses for a little while, but we're not going to take those without a plan that gets us to solvency in a short time. And I hope that, and Dr. Hunter, I just want to say, when you said, I'm going to go public with this, it felt like a veiled threat, which is not the spirit in which we're approaching this. So I hope that that's not where you're coming from. I hope instead you'll say, yeah, we're going to work with you. We want this bridge, and we want to avoid being in that override situation in 2 years.
John.
While Lindsay's
May
doing
I
this.
respond, Eric?
Hang on, let's hear from John. No.
I just want to reiterate, since 2011, the town has grown at 5.3% annually. That's the operational budget as put out by the budget books versus a 2.6% inflation rate if you just want, non-perfect bogey. So I think the dream of getting to efficiencies and whatnot is just that. And, we should stick to our guns. If you feel that the time is right to say, let's have fiscal responsibility, that we're staring down a cliff, then I'm not sure monkeying around with 2.6 to 2.65 is any better message to send, right? The message is it's time to get real, and there's pain for everyone. My real estate taxes went up like 50%. I'm feeling pain, okay? Other people have had similar issues, different magnitudes. Town needs to also be part of the process, and it's not pleasant for anyone. So I would not vote to change, and if we're allowed to make a motion, I'm happy to make a motion, but
Can I just make one procedural comment? So the next step is that someone makes a motion and we vote on our final guideline. Next thing that happens is the town and the schools will come back with a budget. Will it meet the guideline or won't it? I mean, we'll see. And then our next step is to decide whether or not to support that motion when it's printed in the warrant.
Right.
And maybe we do support the higher number at that point in time. Maybe that's where the compromise happens. So we do have another bite at the apple, if you will, to when we vote whether or not to approve the warrant article that is put forth.
That's exactly what happens, you're right.
Yeah.
We can decide whether or not we want to recommend affirmative action on the budget once it comes forward to town
Maybe
meeting.
they'll come in at the budget that we
Yeah.
have proposed.
Or we recommend affirmative action at another number, so.
We've done that too.
But
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just, so Peggy, I agree with you. I mean, as we said at the outset, this is a recommendation. The budget units can take this recommendation, I hope they do, or not. Proceed to develop their budgets. We'll review them during our public hearings, but the vote is ultimately town meeting. It's not us. If it happens that we're apart at town meeting, that's okay. Reasonable people can disagree on things and still get along. I have disagreements with
Like
my
the last
friends,
2
my
years.
wife all the time, and we're still, for the most part, happily married. So I agree with you. And to me, that's continuing this collaborative approach that Dr. Hunter referenced, that after tonight, regardless of where we land, we don't turn our backs on one another. We go into the budget process and the public hearings and town meeting itself with open lines of communication.
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Hunter and then Lindsay and Greg.
Yeah, thank you. Please, I apologize if in any way you took it as anything threatening or otherwise. I just know that the question I'm going to be asked is, if we went to guideline, what are we going to not have? And ultimately, that puts me in a position of having to figure out how to answer that. And I suspect that'll come in the next shorter term. So that's all I was saying, was that will be the question that comes to me and to the school committee is, well, what's going to have to get cut? And it's not a threat or anything else. It just eventually becomes part of the discussion.
Thank you.
And I think something that Don said really resonated with me, that like maybe that is the collaboration, is like this commitment to going beyond what we think we can do a little bit every year. And maybe it's not, maybe that means we meet maybe that means giving a little bit this year with the knowledge that every year we're going to just, be as open as we can and like commit to cutting a little more than we think we can, but maybe not being too, maybe just being a little bit more open to this incrementality, I guess is what I'm saying, as long as we're all like mutually committed to it.
Let me go to Greg. I think Greg had his hand up first, and then Kathy.
Yeah,
Greg.
if we could do just the midway, like half of that, and then maybe take, like I said, bring each of those down or up by a half, whichever way you want to say.
So I did bring this down from 2.7 to 2.5. So I
Before
basically.
John makes his motion, no.
Sorry, just one second.
I'm ready to go.
What I did in this scenario is gave them back each about 100,000. So this was 419, this delta from the preliminary guideline. Now it's oh, sorry, so did I go the wrong? No. So it's 319 now.
220.
It was 414 or 415.
Right, and then this was 212, and now it's 112. Or 114. But, so you want to go, though, one step
And then
further.
go
So
one step more by taking.
Oh, wait, sorry, so that should be two, yeah.
No, take some from the.
Sorry, I gotta go.
But take the 100 from the high school also.
Yeah.
Oh,
No, but
okay,
we
do
weren't
that
gonna
one
do
again?
that.
We can do we can do whatever we want. I'm suggesting that we do take from the high school.
So we can look at the overall.
Because we could bring that towel a little bit more, like you said, right? There's efficiencies. I understand. I'm trying to work.
All right, that's 2.77, where you want it to be.
Right, so it's right around that little rate. I just wanted to see the numbers right now, so that, thank you for that. And John, to your point, totally agree the efficiencies and stuff, but I think we need to get a plan to do that rather than just saying, hey, it's gonna be tough this year, we're just gonna sit here. Because I know at my company.
It's gonna be tough every year.
I know at my company, I hired somebody and they burned out $750,000, but it took time to find that money to be able to burn it out of the budget, right? Because it wasn't apparent. It was in so many little details that our company had spread around that if our budget was, pushed back a little bit, we wouldn't be able to hire that person, then we wouldn't have found those efficiencies.
Yeah.
Just throw that out there.
Yeah,
I would like a plan rather than,
Yeah, and I agree with Greg. I mean, you don't solve a problem that's been building for years with one dramatic gesture. We have competent people in the town, and you're referring to problems that long preceded Carrie's role as town manager. This has been building for a while, and you need to give the people who are here now, who are competent, well-intended people, the tools to solve the problem. And you don't do that with that drastic a cut. So that's, I don't disagree with some of what you're saying, John, but I would like to see, I'd like to give the people here the tools they need to fix the problems that we are and that you are appropriately raising right now.
Paul?
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry, Kathy. I thought.
Sorry, Kathy.
This is so agonizing. The comment about doing some negotiation at this point. The thoughts that come to my mind is that I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the last 2 years have seen town meeting vote for higher budgets than guideline. So there was not, it hasn't been, a focus on reducing costs. So I don't get that changing guideline at this point means that miraculously next year there's going to be a different outcome. So, and I don't feel that setting a reasonable guideline with valid inputs means that you're punishing anybody. We're not. We're a financial body that uses financial metrics to set goals. So that's that statement. With regards to corporate management versus schools or town management, if I had a number, and I would be held to a number in a corporation, I might have to go around and, take a little bit off of, a dozen line items, not say, oh, well, we're just going to stop doing tax returns this year, or we're not going to do any compliance monitoring. You don't just throw out a product line, you take a little bit all around. So I have often had difficulty understanding how these organizations view managing to a number. So I'm rambling now because of the situation, but bottom line, my view is that we are reasonable people, we use financial metrics, we should work with them, and as somebody else has already just said, it's just a guideline. We haven't seen the budgets. There's many more opportunities for discussions, and I would hope that the goodwill and the camaraderie that's been between the town and the schools and the finance committee for the last 6 months continues on. And I think that we should vote to approve a guideline.
Is that a motion?
That is, well, can I make a motion?
Yes?
Can I say something first?
Sure. Okay, I have to leave the room, so.
Okay.
Okay.
The thing that I just wanted to say is, we all know the power of personnel and how it overwhelms major portions of the budget, and we have to maintain that percentage as it goes forth. So even increasing a budget could somewhat act as it look like a functional cut to other aspects of those budgets, but we're not cutting the budget. We are providing a guideline of growth, which enables someone to look at those other lines and take a look at it. And we're avoiding the situation which will facilitate an actual cut of the budget. And I think having that frame of reference is important to think about, that, we don't want to actually look at the cut, and looking at a slightly different increase is a lot more palatable.
That's a good point.
John?
Can I make a motion to approve the preliminary guideline as our final guideline?
You may. Are you making the motion?
I would like to, if that's appropriate at this point.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second?
Seconded.
All right, now we have discussion.
Discussion.
I saw Carrie's hand up before the motion, so I just wanted to give her a chance to
Sorry.
speak.
Yeah, I just have a couple quick comments, if that's okay. Sorry. Just number one, Paul, I totally understand what you're saying, and you're not wrong. It is growth. However, at the same time, we are bound by contracts that are at, we are already coming in underneath what the contracts that we've agreed to are going to. So 3% for our teachers, which is obviously the biggest contract, and we're requesting a guideline that is below that. So, and you're giving us one that's even, or suggesting one that is even further below that. So all your prerogative, and I'm just saying that it is not actually growth when you look at exactly how our money is already laid out before we even begin to think about how we're spending it. And then the second piece is like, if I would just ask, it sounds like there's already a motion on the table, but getting to the CCRSD guideline, we are already committing to cuts that we don't even know how we're going to get to. So that was really done because we were of the process and how everything was has played out. And so I would just ask that you not further cut CCRSD in your conversations, because we are already trying to figure out how we're going to reach that guideline, but are committing to doing it because of just the give and take that there has been already. So that's my 2 points. I think you had, sorry.
Thank you.
I was just 10 seconds. I totally understand, but the functionality of the inevitability that which we're trying to avoid is really like a negative aspect of the whole budget, which will be incredibly harder to deal with. So I completely understand what you're saying, and I just want to avoid that future.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion. It's been seconded, so we'll open it up to discussion on the motion.
So do we want to look at some of the scenarios that Lindsay has been fooling around with to see if we want to try and amend the motion, or have we moved past that?
I think we've moved past that.
My sense is we've moved, that is outside the scope of the motion.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know if we've moved past it, but it's outside the
Yeah.
scope of this. In past times, we've had sort of everybody, like the 3 sets of what we have, and we, 2 sets last year or whatever, and people have voted for it. So right now, we only have that one. So in order to do that, now we have to make an amendment to his motion, right? And I'm going to throw it out there. Lindsay, can you just read the numbers off for me? Because I'm, again, in the back row here. I would like to make a little bit of a compromise with the 3 entities, and I think what you had up there.
So what we have right here, I mean, I just kind of threw this out here, is right now there's nothing changed to CCRSD.
Good.
But we have a 2.4% increase for CPS. They're requesting 2.7. We had said 1.81 net of the middle school savings. And then the town we're saying 2.85%. They're requesting 3.25%, and our preliminary guideline had been 2.6%. So it's a bit of a compromise. It's a little bit more of a compromise, a little bit more in favor of schools, it looks like, slightly, but it comes out to 2.79% increase versus our preliminary guideline is 2.44%.
Okay, so if I were to read that, the first number was 2.4. Is that what you?
2.4 for CPS.
Okay.
Same for CCRSD, so no change. 2.85 for town.
Okay.
And it comes out to a total of 2.79 overall.
So.
Sure, the levy. 2.79 is approximately this row. So it takes, the excess levy capacity goes to 2.99%.
From
3.3.
From 3.3?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to, I guess, amend John's motion there to 2.4 for CPS. I hear people's feedback on the regional and 2.85 for the town. Lindsay, just please spot check those numbers that I have them right.
So the Robert's Rule of Order is that we vote on the amendment.
Amendment, yeah.
Right.
First needs a second, and I'll second
Right.
this motion.
Okay. Okay, so the motion is to amend John's motion to change the guidelines to what's shown on the screen in yellow and orange.
2.44 to 2.79.
I'll second that.
We're ready for a vote?
Lindsay, can I ask a
Well,
question on your
let's have some
numbers?
discussion.
Yeah, make sure this
No, no, no,
looks-
no. I just want to make sure I'm interpreting your spreadsheet. The 273, 399, and the 81, 864, so a total of 355K. That's the delta from our preliminary, correct?
That's how much we're coming up.
Okay.
So we're coming up 273 for CPS and 81 for the town. So it is a little more in favor of CPS. So if we want to make adjustments there, we can.
Okay, discussion on the motion. Sri?
I mean, I'm okay with these numbers, provided that there's a process in place for the efficiencies, because we just keep doing this, we'll have the same discussion next year. And it'll be, this is circular logic will never work, basically. So I think we have to have a process in place so that we, just because we are, coming up to the limit, so in 2 years or less. And if we keep, this is good, the compromise is good, but is there a process in place for the efficiencies?
Can we get a letter from the FinCom to the town to just state exactly John's and my point? Like,
To all the
hey, we need
operating
to drive-
units.
Yeah, we need to drive the efficiency, we hear it, but we need to, and Mary said, they got interrupted this year, so, but we do need to.
There'll be an interruption next
Yeah,
year.
like, we do need to make it a priority, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it as an action item regardless of where we land to
Right.
put together a formal memo communicating the guideline, and I can stress this need to collaborate on identifying efficiencies. I don't know that we have the ability to
We don't
kind
have
of enforce that, but we can certainly, right.
Can I comment on that? I would say rather than enforcing efficiencies, I would say we would be asking for a commitment to work with us on a plan to avoid override, because
Yeah.
any further increase brings us closer to that. And so we should, if we're going to do that, we should have a collaborative effort that the town and the schools would both work with us to develop scenarios that brings us to a future that's free of overrides. Because we're dangerously close if we increase our guidelines.
Okay, Paul.
Harry has her hand up.
Okay, let's stay within the FinCom first, and then we'll go to the audience. Paul.
So can, Lindsay, would you mind just going back to the where the guideline worksheet is? No, I'm sorry, the,
Levy limit.
I'm sorry?
This
The
one?
levy limit, yes. And I do want to highlight that we are, like, when we set the preliminary guideline, it was, intentionally, we were asking for collaboration with both the schools and with the town. And where we would set up with the amended motion, thank you very much, sorry. The amended motion is still above where our various scenarios were when we were setting the preliminary limit. So I don't want to lose track of the idea that, we are still holding to the concept of trying to work together to drive those costs down.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's important to note that and we saw quite a bit of commitment from both sides already to try to do that. We're just asking them to try to do it a little bit more.
Lindsay, I'm just blanking. What was the top line of our metric? We came in the middle of our metric. 3.26. So we're still well below the upper edge of our original metric.
Right,
Yeah, okay.
mainly
But
due
your
to
point's
the
well
middle
taken.
school savings.
Right.
But yes, which is one time, but yes.
Which is, that's a one
Yeah.
time, right?
I want to make sure Carrie gets a chance to say something because she had her hand up.
Carrie.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so I appreciate this development. I just want to say, I think that we have not seen our budget. We have not discussed it as a committee. I have not even seen the the Excel sheet yet. But I believe that this is something that we as a committee can get behind, and would work really hard to meet this amended number for CPS.
So you want to call for a vote on the amendment?
Yeah, I just want to make, any other discussion on the amendment? No, at this point, let's respectfully, Alexa, we're gonna proceed on the amendment, the motion to amend, and then we'll come back to you. I think we're ready for a call of the roll.
Okay. So this, I should read back the amendment here. So this vote is on the amendment to the motion that John made earlier. And the amendment is to create a compromise at two, would you, Lindsay, please read those numbers one more time for us?
CPS would be 2.4% increase over what was approved last year at town meeting. CCRSD would be the same as the preliminary, 3.48%. And the town would be 2.85%.
Okay, thank you.
For a total of 2.79%.
79, which brings us to 3% on the.
Which brings the excess levy capacity down to
Yep.
approximately 3%.
Okay, thanks. All right. Suresh Bhatia,
Yes.
Peggy Briggs,
No.
Kathy Cuoklo is out of the room. Eric Dahlberg,
No.
John Garofalo,
No.
Pat Geyer,
Yes.
Greg Ariella,
Yes.
Don Kupka, I vote yes. Lindsay Liss,
Yes.
Dee Ortner,
No.
Carlin Reed,
Yes.
Paul Rodriguez,
Yes.
Sri Tupel,
Yes.
and Lois Wassoff.
Yes.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 yes, 1, 2, 3, 4 no, correct. So the motion passes.
So the motion carries.
The amended
So now we
motion.
have
The-
to do a vote.
So the original motion is amended per Greg's motion. So we'll now
Vote again.
vote on the
Amended
amended motion.
So could you read back the amended motion?
We don't need to, we know.
I thought we just voted on that.
It's the same,
No.
it is the same thing.
It's the same thing, but we.
It's just a procedural.
Amended the motion.
have to
so
do it.
before-
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So
Now
it
it's
changes
the
the motion so that it goes to
Now the
amended numbers. So now we're voting to make this the guideline.
Correct.
So-
Right. Right. Before we do that, any discussion on the amended motion? Hearing none, I think we can proceed to a roll call.
Suresh Bhatia,
Aye.
Peggy Briggs,
Nay.
Eric Dahlberg,
Yes.
John Garofalo,
No.
Pat Geyer,
Yes.
Greg Ariella,
Yes.
Don Kupka, I vote yes. Lindsay Liss,
Yes.
Dee Ortner,
No.
Carlin Reed,
Yes.
Paul Rodriguez,
Yes.
Sri Tupel,
Yes.
Lois Wassoff.
Yes.
So the motion carries by a vote. We have
10
one
to-
more yes than last
10
time.
to 3.
3-3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, and as I said, I will take an action item to put together a formal memo communicating the final guideline to town and school leadership. I will include language around working together to identify efficiencies going forward. And I will circulate that via email before I send it. My goal, have a draft by, let's say, end of day tomorrow. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Great discussion. Glad we were able to come to consensus. I will return to the agenda. Next up, we have Finance Committee report to town meeting for fiscal year '26.
Okay.
Dawn.
So I'd like to share my screen, so I'll do that. So last time I spoke about the total cost of Concord, which is, and thank you for your input on that, and making changes on that section of the report. Today I wanted to, in the same way, sort of bring to you something else that would be a little bit new to the report. And I thought that it'd be good to directly address the question of why are our taxes so high. And this little diagram is more illustrative. It's not literal in any way. But it says that what we're doing here is balancing the expected level of services, the rate of inflation, the growth in income, the capital projects that the town undertakes, and all of those things inform the tax rate. The note over here says income and inflation are part of the FinCom budget guidelines. This is, again, for informing the citizens who aren't aware of what's going on. And then the service level, the rate of inflation, and the FinCom guideline all inform the operating budgets that are voted on at town meeting. On the capital project side, that schools, town buildings, all major projects are voted on at town meeting and are funded by bonds, which are paid for by taxes. You'd be surprised how many people don't realize that that's how this all works. And the result is increased taxes. The subtle message trying to make is attend town meeting and vote, really. If you're not happy, that's the time. So then I made this note that the increase in taxes is limited by the levy limit, which is the maximum tax permitted by law without an override vote. And that last year, Concord came closer to our levy limit than we have in many years. With Anthony's help, I'm going to get that data and show how that window has been closing. And thank you, Carlin, for finding that document that had been used previously. I'll be incorporating a section on what is Prop 2.5, how does this work? And I can say that I learned a lot this past week on this subject and wanted to just share in case anybody else you guys probably already knew all of this, but I didn't. But so Prop 2.5 it has two 2.5s. One of them says there is a levy ceiling, an absolute max you can't even override beyond. That is 2.5% of the value of all property, taxable, real property and personal property. And then there's that's sort of a big picture number. Thankfully, we're well short of that. But then there's the annual levy limit, and that is a number that grows each year, regardless of the rate of inflation. It grows by 2.5% plus the tax increment from new construction in town. So when you think about it, it kind of makes sense that we're approaching the levy limit now. We've just come off of the highest inflation in a long time, but that levy limit doesn't go up with inflation. It goes up at the same rate, regardless of high inflation or low. So, I think that's really interesting, and I intend to include a couple of paragraphs on that. Now, just by way of sharing some of the history here with this group. Oh, I guess it's not sharing. Share. I have to switch over to the slide I want to share, I guess. Override. Yeah, I'll do the Excel. I have it as a clean diagram, but I'll share this and it'll perhaps give you a little bit more data. So these are all of Concord's override votes. And starting in 1992, CCRSD proposed a $209,000 override. The red dot is the vote margin. It failed by 15% at the polls. And it was 10 years before anybody came back for another override. In 2002,
I'm sorry, Don, what are the colors?
the red bars are the high school. The blue bars are the Concord Public Schools. And the gray bars are the town.
Okay.
And then the dot is the margin on the vote. So a 10-year hiatus without an override vote, the town had 2 override articles. One was just for $15,000 for mosquito control. I think it was more a question of do the citizens want mosquito control? And that passed by 38%.
But they had to do that because the FinCom said you can't spend money unless you tell us how you're going to fund it.
Beautiful.
And that's how they funded it.
Okay.
Institutional memory is a beautiful
Yeah, I
thing.
love that. I'm so glad to hear it.
Not really.
Peggy. Then also the town asked for $350,000 for operational budget, and that passed by 17%. So about half the margin of the mosquito control. That year, the Concord Public Schools asked for $1,375,000, and it passed, but only by 6% of the vote. Then the high school asked for $500,000, and it passed by just 5%. The next year, 2003, we again had overrides. The Concord Public School passed by just 3%. The high school passed by just 6%. The town override passed by 27%. So a lot of people were voting for that one.
Don, let me ask you one quick question. When you say voting for, this is for the town election or special town election, not town meeting vote?
Not town meeting. This is the
This is
town
the
election.
actual election
Correct.
vote.
To
And are
authorize the
these
override.
all operational? These are
Yes,
just
these are only
operational?
operational
Okay.
overrides. Yep. In 2004, I think this was the year, well, I know this was the year in which there were choices given. And
Better, best,
yeah,
like Sears.
so there was the FinCom guideline number, there was the higher number for, and at least for CPS, this was the case. So CPS really wanted $1,628,000, and that was defeated by an 18% margin. Their second choice was $875,000, and that passed by less than 1% of the vote at the polls. And had that not passed, they would have had $875,000 cut out of the budget because they would have had to go with the guideline.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
If there is a override vote and it fails,
Yeah.
they are just set with what? Like, what is the effect on their
I
budget?
think it's the current budget.
Right,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
it is.
The current budget.
It's the current budget,
Not the FinCom guideline.
not guideline,
Yeah, that's
no.
what I thought.
Thanks.
Not unless they vote the guideline.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's the current budget.
That same year, the high school asked for about $500,000, and it passed by only a 2% margin. The next year, they came back to the, CPS came back to the well, looking for, let's see, I'm sorry, that was 2004 still. The town also asked for money that year. They asked for $350,000, and that went down by 9%. That failed by 9% of the vote. And the town had an alternative, which was $182,000, and that passed by 3%. Now we jump over to the next year, 2005. Again, high school, CPS, and town all had override votes, and they all passed by, and they passed by the highest margins, 19%, 18%, and 27% of the vote that year. And then 2006, we again had overrides for all three. They passed by slimmer margins, 11, 11, and 7%. And finally, you see 2007 votes, all passed by 15% or so, and they were all in the $200,000 range. So that's kind of the history. I thought it'd be helpful for this group to see. The other thing, I found all this data from the state, and the state file has also all of the other, all the overrides for every state. You can sort it any which way you like. So every town, and this is the most recent year. And again, I mentioned it earlier, but 55% were defeated at the polls. 55% of overrides. Requests for operating funds were defeated. The average request was over $2 million. And I went through those that succeeded tended to be at the low end of things, you know.
Well, look at Westford, right there. 4.2 million went down.
Yeah, yeah.
And Don, your intention in sharing, you're not contemplating including this in the report, no?
Because I'm doing this research and I found some
Yeah.
stuff, I wanted to share it with you.
Yeah, no, this is interesting.
Yeah. Okay, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, Pat?
I think it's interesting to also note during those years where the vote was high, Don.
Yeah.
The S&P, that's what I do for a living, didn't really go up substantially. Now, you may remember in 2008, that was our mini recession. So there might be an impression in the room that things were just kind of climbing up. Certainly real estate was. That's why we had the big crash, honestly, in 2008. But we kind of averaged up about 10%. 2005 was 4.8, then we were 15.6, then we were back to 5.5 before we crashed down 36.5% 2008. So averaged about the general returns of the S&P, which were 10%.
Interesting observation. So it's the sort of the spirit, the animal spirits in the.
Yeah.
So what happened in those years was the state was in big trouble.
Yeah.
And they started sweeping money away from the rich towns. School funds, road funds, town funds, all the money that the state was giving to towns. That's why the first couple of years were really high. We weren't spending anymore. It was that the money we
The
had
revenue
been
had gone
getting
down.
from
Just
the
disappeared.
state just disappeared.
Really
And there was a lot of complaining, and a lot of finger pointing from other members of the Board of Selectmen at the time, but there was nothing we could do, and they weren't going to give money to the rich towns, so we just basically had to choke it down, and once we got over that hump, we stopped doing it until now.
Suresh, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Don, for a good set of documents and information. One word of caution would be this year, normally we got town meeting on June 2nd. So that means the override takes place after that, which is really puts the school and everybody almost to the very end of June probably, before they even get to know what's happening. Because I believe there's a time frame, I don't recall exactly how many days after town meeting can you have the override vote, if it's needed, if it's required.
No, it's confused. We're not doing an override this year, Suresh.
No, we're not.
No.
Just,
No.
I'm just saying.
No, late, in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Or not, hopefully
Or not.
Or not.
Okay.
Question
Okay.
about the report. Don, have you thought about a structure for the report, an outline? Have you
Yes.
started one of those?
I have an outline for it. I'll share it with you.
Okay, thank you, Don. The next item is the liaison report. I circulated a compilation of the updates I received ahead of this meeting. Does anybody have any clarifying questions or any late additions to the report? Colin?
Question for Paul. In his liaison report on the Minuteman Tech, there's a mention about transportation costs. Can you give me some more information about what's going on there, why they're concerned about transportation costs?
Yeah, I wrote that in the liaison report mainly to show that they're not immune to some of the same issues that the high school and the public school district is dealing with, that there are mandated requirements set forth in their transportation associated with various populations, and they have to accommodate those requirements, which add some variability and some planning into their budget cycle, and that's why I put it in there.
Anything else on the liaison report? Okay, next item is Finance Committee schedule and checking in on goals. I'll go back to my slides. I included in the slides, or I included in the packet, an updated schedule. So as we cover a month, it gets grayed out. Hard to believe we're more than halfway through the year at this point. Here we are in December. We've approved our guidelines Looking ahead to our next meeting in January, I added that meeting, it'll be one meeting, but that meeting will combine a regular FinCom meeting with that public hearing on capital. And that'll be on January 9th. At the regular meeting portion of that night, our hope is to have that tax impact table ready for presentation and discussion. Okay. And then the rest of the schedule remains as previously drafted and shared. Goals. Recall that we set some goals for ourselves when we first got organized in May and fine-tuned them a bit in June. These are our goals. I know it's late. We don't necessarily have to go through these line by line. I just like to share these every few months to keep them somewhat front and center as we progress through the year. And we've made great progress on virtually all of them. We're on track with our milestones and our dates. We're working on that unified long-term capital plan in partnership with the select board and the school committee. Revenue, we've been increasingly vocal about the need to identify new revenue sources. Financial policies, working with staff on that, and we've got an action item to get that working group set up. Liaisons, our liaisons are active, doing a great job of sharing updates. Communications, I think we continue to do a good job. Collaborated with Carlisle on the CCHS guideline for the first time. So we're making progress. Dee.
On the revenue one, is there a way, maybe at the next meeting, or the next couple meetings, that we can really have conversations with some of the other organizations here, like the Economic Vitality, the task force, and all, and really try to figure out what can we do, if anything?
Sure, we could do that.
All right,
We've
on
had,
revenue, I just think that we really need to be more aggressive in that area.
okay, we can do that.
I'd just like
Barry.
remind everybody that the Economic Vitality Committee is hosting a forum on January 29th to talk about that.
Oh, great. Okay.
Well, actually, what we're talking about is, what does Concord mean by commercial development?
Yeah.
What do we mean by that?
Maybe cell towers would help, but that's just me.
That's a whole other night.
I'm sorry.
Okay, making progress on goals. But Dee, that's a good point. I mean, we did have Mike Lawson in a few meetings ago to talk
Yeah.
about what they're doing. We're collaborating on the, preparing for the forum. But we can certainly invite them back in to share updates and to talk further with them.
Just, the schools have some initiatives too. It'd be nice to know what those are,
They're-
what their timelines are.
Revenue initiatives, you mean?
Revenue issues,
Yeah.
Be nice. It's a big thing for Laurie, and
Yeah.
I think it would be really nice.
I think that's a very good suggestion.
Mhm.
And on one point, on the communications point, maybe it's just a suggested action item for, out of this meeting. We should be thinking about how to communicate our guidelines to the public. We should be maybe thinking about something in the bridge where we explain a little bit about where we came down, and we can use it as a way of emphasizing that we want to be encouraging the budgeting groups to be thinking about efficiencies because we're concerned about the possibility of needing an override. We can start doing some public education on that point and use this event as a way of framing that.
I think that's a great idea. Would you be willing,
Yeah, I'll
Lois, to
look
take a crack at that? And what you could
I should
do,
have kept my mouth shut.
Yeah, I'll work with you.
You could get a
on
quote
that.
right there.
Oh, it's no good idea goes unpunished.
Yeah, it's so true.
well, what you could do is I'll take a first crack at it
Well,
through the memo.
you're
I'll
gonna do
draft the memo and you
then-
can use
and
that
then
as
I'll use the memo and I'll prepare something for Dee to look at, and then she'll make it read like it's readable as opposed to like somebody who used to be a lawyer wrote it.
Okay, that's great. Okay, back to our agenda. Correspondence. So we got a ton of correspondence in our packet. A lot of it was specific to the Doug White Field issue. It was informative, but we don't really have a role on that issue at this time. We do appreciate folks reaching out as always. Did get some input on the guideline process, which we appreciate. Whenever anybody directs correspondence to the Finance Committee through that general inbox, we include it as correspondence, and I send a response back to the sender, just acknowledging receipt and letting them know it's been shared with the full membership. That's the process we've been following. It seems to work well.
So a question, is there
Sorry.
anything associated with the Doug White Fields that we're involved in?
Not at this time. It doesn't involve town spending or borrowing, so we don't really have a role to play.
Mary, did the select board adopt that policy on correspondence at the meeting?
We have a policy, it's complicated, we had a policy that had exemptions, and that said, we'll publish everything unless it threatens people or, we had exceptions where we said we wouldn't publish it.
Yeah.
And then we found out that that might run afoul of a person's freedom of speech, their rights, so we're revising the policy.
Oh, but it hasn't been revised yet?
No.
Okay.
but it's complicated.
Because once you revise that policy, we could use that as a guide for us.
If you want to, sure.
Yeah.
Do I have to do that?
No, it's okay, it's good. It's late, we're tired, we're punchy, all right.
Okay. Minutes. So we have two sets of minutes for review and approval tonight. The first is the minutes from November 18th. Those were included in packets. Did everybody get a chance to take a look, and does anybody have any proposed changes or corrections?
Move to approve.
Second?
Discussion? Hearing none? Oh, yeah.
Do the roll
Makes sense.
altogether.
Okay. So, Peggy, would you like to amend your motion to capture both the November 18th and November 21st meeting minutes?
Oh, I move that we approve both the minutes from November 18th, 2024, and November 21st, 2024.
Second?
Discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Excellent. As part of the discussion, the minutes are excellent.
They really are.
They are.
Thank you to Dawn and Colin.
Teamwork.
Yeah.
Okay, roll call vote. Suresh Bhatia?
I'll abstain, I was not present.
Peggy Briggs?
Aye.
Kathy Quoklow is out of the room. Eric Dahlberg?
Yes.
John Garofalo?
Yes.
Pat Geyer?
Yes.
Greg Gariello?
Yes.
Don Kupka, I'm a yes. Lindsay Liss?
Yes.
Dee Ortner?
Yes.
Carlin Reed?
Aye.
Paul Rodriguez?
Yes.
Quasi is not here. Sri Trupel?
Yes.
And Lois Wassel?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Thank you.
One abstention, yeah, sorry.
Okay, before we adjourn, quick recap of action items. I got two. The first is I will prepare a memo formally communicating the final guidelines to town and school leadership. I'll include the statement around working together to identify efficiencies. The second is, and I'll circulate a draft of that via email by end of day tomorrow. And I'd ask folks to take a look and get back to me, and only me, with suggestions to avoid open meeting law issues.
When do you require them to be?
Let's say noon on Monday, because then I can finalize it and send it by end of day Monday. And then the second related, Lois graciously agreed to take a crack at a letter to the bridge regarding the final guidelines, using the memo as the starting point.
Excellent.
With Dee's able editing assistance.
Okay.
Yeah.
With that, Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.